Street Talk! Yeah!
Welcome to Street Talk. I am your host, Jason, and this is for Monday, January the 12th. Well, finally here, after all these years, a true national title game in college football. We've waited. Now we're here. There will be no disputing tomorrow. There will be no multiple undefeated teams. This team should have won it, this team. Whoever wins tonight on the field will be the undisputed champion of college football. Oregon Ducks versus the Ohio State University Buckeyes. Now we get this prop straight up. Why is that significant? Because looking at the betting lines, Oregon minus 6-point favorite. That's a minus 210 money line. We remove the VIG. The implied percent is Oregon is a 65% favorite based on the betting line. Looking at computer simulations, we get something very similar. I think I looked at 5, and they all had Oregon winning outright. Ranges of 67% of the time, all the way up to 74% of the time. So it looks like Oregon is a pretty good favorite, especially on a prop like Streak for the Cash. But, caveat, remember last year, Florida State, Auburn, very similar lines, very similar results, and Florida State barely pulled out a victory, only in the last seconds. Granted, they pulled it out, but it wasn't the disparity that we maybe thought going into the game. Statistically speaking, defensively, Ohio State 33rd in the nation versus the run, Oregon 50th in the nation versus the run. Ohio State 17th versus the pass, Oregon 103rd versus the pass. So it looks statistically like Ohio State has a little bit of an advantage, if not a significant advantage, at least in the passing game, as Oregon. Now I know there might be a caveat in that teams are behind against Oregon a lot, so they're pass, and a lot of those are maybe garbage yards. But Ohio State has blown out a lot of teams too. So the same thing should have been said against them, but really they're 17th in the nation. So advantage on defense to Ohio State. On offense, we know about the Oregon led by Mariota. We know he's won the Heisman, but they're actually, statistically speaking, very similar offenses, and even down to points scored per game. Ohio State scoring 45 points a game, Oregon 47 points a game. So it's really something to look at. We know that Ohio State has faced 2 top 10 defenses in their last 2 games. Two of the top defenses in the nation in their last 2 games. They've had over 500 yards of offense in both of those games versus Alabama and Wisconsin. So even going against the top defenses, which we can by no means say Oregon is, Ohio State has put up a ton of yards. One thing to note, last game, for instance, when they played Alabama, Alabama was the number 2 rushing defense in the nation, allowing 88 yards a game. Ezekiel Elliott by himself, running back for Ohio State, had 230 yards in that game. As a team, they had 280 yards. So almost 200 yards more than Alabama was allowing a game. If Oregon allows 350 yards on the ground, this game is over. Now, how did Ohio State we've gone over this a bunch of times. They lost Braxton Miller, they lost Barrett, Cardale Jones comes in. How are they doing it? Well, when Urban Meyer was actually out of football and he was announcing for ESPN, he actually went to Oregon, spent some time with Chip Kelly, learned a lot of the Oregon offense. When Oregon was playing in their bowl game last year, Ohio State was ineligible. He went to their bowl game, watched it, and sort of tried to mirror what they do. And he's got the results. As you can see, it seems every time they've written him off because they've had an injury on quarterback, he's plugged somebody else in, and they haven't missed a beat. Now, a couple sort of betting notes. As an underdog under Urban Meyer, Ohio State 5-0. Straight up, not just against the spread, straight up. So he seems to embrace that underdog mentality, seems to be able to rally his troops. So Marcus Mariota, I will mention the first half prop. Lost Prodigal has some good information out there. Will Mariota score a rushing and a passing touchdown in the first half? He's done it in half his games this year. Ohio State hasn't allowed it in any of their games, which, of course, they haven't faced a quarterback as good as Mariota. But remember, Oregon is missing their top 2 wide receivers, one from a knee injury, and one was just suspended due to marijuana charges. So they're a little bit thinner on offense. How's that going to play out? I'm going to swim upstream. I'm going to wolf it. I think Ohio State gets this done. I've counted them out so many times this year. Every time they've had an injury, every time when they lost to Virginia Tech at home, I thought, oh, their season's over, whatever. And every time Urban Meyer has rallied them. I'm trying to sort of read the Vegas tea leaves, as they say. And I think Ohio State gets this done. I think as far as the first half prop goes, I would go with no, especially with them being a little thinner on offense. I think it gives Ohio State even more of a chance to put guys spying Mariota or whatever. I don't think it's a lights out pick either way, because he is going to have to take some of the burden away. So I could see him maybe pushing it and maybe thus scoring the 2 touchdowns. But I would go with no there. Second half prop, I told you before many times, don't look at these until you've seen how the first half plays out. Just based on sort of the numbers, as I've said, they're very similar scoring teams. I would go with Ohio State with the tie, with noting that it could come down to Oregon. They like to go for 2 a lot of times on their extra point try. So would that be the difference? But see how the first half plays out, and maybe monthly players, Ohio State might, with the tie, might be the value play there. But overall, for the game, Ohio State takes the first ever national title. Urban Meyer wins another one. I hope you guys enjoy it and enjoy the game. We'll see you next time on Street Talk.